Hey everybody, I was really under the impression that homelessness was an emergency, this problem that everybody in Oakland is really concerned about, right? And I held out hope that Oakland was finally considering homelessness as just that, an emergency, when I saw three items up for consideration by the Oakland City Council May 28th. But from a media standpoint, all of those initiatives are overshadowed by a item on committee that or the Oakland City Council that, if passed by the full City Council, would lead to the decriminalization of psychedelic drugs. Now, I have nothing against the decriminalization of psychedelic drugs, but I do have something against the rapidity at which this has come up as an issue. All the white media, and I'm just putting this bluntly, the mainstream media that hires journalists that are white pay more attention to this than anything else on the council agenda. You could just tell, all you gotta do is type Oakland in search, particularly in Google, which is the leader in terms of search engine market share, and that's what popped up in top stories. And I thought, are you kidding me? I've lived in Oakland since April 8th of 74. I have never, ever seen a time until this year, and the year before, less so, and the year before, less so that. But starting in 2016, when mushrooms and psychedelic drugs became a topic of standard conversation in Oakland, and part of mainstream conversation, and by people who were new to Oakland, who were white. This wasn't a drug that was commonly used by everybody in the black community in Oakland, let alone around the country. With African Americans, the problems were generally centered around marijuana, cocaine, and alcohol for the most part, okay? But a psychedelic drug, no. And in order to check my thought, to make sure that I wasn't just echoing an anecdotal, take, I looked for demographic information on the use of psychedelic drugs, and I could find little divided by race. But what I did find rested in studies of people who were using such things as, for example, magic mushrooms. Studies where 90% of the respondents were white and 4% were black. Or then there was this conference that occurred in 2017, of all places, Oakland, and written about by a woman by the name of Ali McGee, who says she's a journalist, creative writer, and academic whose work have appeared in the Edgar Allan Poe Review, Romantic Circles, and something called Symbiosis, a journal of Anglo-American literacy. And the title of this piece is we're all enlightened here, discussing racism in the psychedelic community. And it starts off basically with jumping through the long paragraphs here, and because it takes a while to get to the point, it says, as one might expect, conversations within this community were open, lively, and stimulating. Despite the conviviality of the whole thing, I kept circling around a particular nagging question. Why weren't there more people of color in attendance? And you would say, okay, what is this program I'm talking about? It's called the official program of the week-long Psychedelic Science Conference in Oakland, which ended on a high note, she says, or writes, as researchers, creatives, and psychonauts, as they call themselves, celebrated a roundly successful program. Psychedelic Science 2017, which came 4 years after the last conference, introduced attendees to the most cutting-edge advances currently happening in science and shamanism around the globe. And then she goes on to write, we are, as field leaders, continuously note at the beginning of a psychedelic renaissance. MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, the main conference organizers, along with the UK-based Beckley Foundation, is deep into research on what's called MDMA as a treatment for post-traumatic stress syndrome, and their extensive studies of afflicted veterans are about to enter phase 3 trials, the final stop before FDA approval in the United States. And so anyway, Then they get to this question of race, which I will repeat. Why weren't there more people of color in attendance? And she responds with this. The answer is, as with all things related to race, complicated. And she goes on to talk about how interest in psychedelics is on the uptick, and talks about the fact that the MDMA was the hot topic, and with the term plant medicine, she veers off the question. I mean, I'm looking for the answer. I'm not getting it. I have to scroll down. I'm not getting to it, okay? And goes on to say that that the therapists from traditional Western backgrounds have little or no affiliation with the cultures from which they source these plants. Okay, and it doesn't get to the point, right? Why weren't there more black folks there? And as you read through it, you basically come up with this conclusion. You have people telling those few persons of color in the audience who raised the issue, and the person who's white, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And my thought is that's very similar to the response that some people give when you talk about the dramatic rates of market rate housing in Oakland and how the rents are rising, and some people think, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Well, there is something. You can build more low-income or extremely low-income housing. We need about 4,000 units in Oakland. And we can do it quickly if we want to. Jerry Brown had a 10K program for market rate housing. You mean we can't have a 4K program for extremely low rent housing? I mean, come on. Ridiculous. But the standard focus, the standard line is this. If it is a concern of those who are new to Oakland, predominantly white, and at least, if not well-moneyed, then well-connected to be able to get the help they need, it becomes a large issue and becomes something the media, which spawns from the same earth, if you will, focuses on. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. And meanwhile, the problem that truly plagues Oakland, that is mostly a black problem, homelessness, is one where the city of Oakland drags its feet to solve. You see what I'm getting at? So you have this situation where, oh yeah, this psychedelic drug decriminalization will happen like that. And it should, for one reason, because of those who are more likely to be arrested for using such drugs, given the way the law works with respect to incarcerating African Americans, it would be us. So yeah, decriminalize it basically to protect us from a racist law enforcement system that would seek to incarcerate someone African American who, even though they're less likely to use psychedelic drugs, is far more likely to be jailed from the use of them, okay, because of the use of them, okay? But this overarching cycle of just valuing something because it's, regarded as cool, wealthy, white, and intelligent has to stop. We're not solving the real problems we need to solve, and that type of thinking has really gotten us into trouble as a Bay Area society, and in particular Oakland. It's completely transformed Oakland in a way that is not healthy, in a way where businesses cannot survive and pay their bills because the rents at the places that they're trying to maintain their going concerns or live in are outrageously high, far outside of their true value, their true social value in this society. I'm simply saying that the market, as it's structured right now, has been allowed to achieve in home price levels that are at fantasy size. They bear no logic. None. Except for the fact that we allow them to exist. We have to get rid of them in order to make Bay Area society healthy again. But to do that, we have to focus on the problems, on solving the problems that most affect people who don't look like those in the mainstream who have the most money. That is the problem, okay? That is the problem. Oakland needs to step up to the plate and do that. Decriminalize mushrooms? Fine. But focus laser beam like on solving the homeless problem. To in fact take that issue and rope it into solving the homeless problem. Because if it's decriminalized, are those drugs going to find their way more into African Americans who can ill afford them but are homeless, and thereby exacerbating that problem? All right? So there's a great concern here that I have for why this is getting so much press. And basically it's because, and you're not going to like my saying this, but it's a bald truth. You have what is essentially a white story covered by white journalists. Many of those journalists would say, and I mean traditional journalists would say, oh, save us, protect what we do, but they don't tell the stories of the society around them, or more to the point, they don't want organizations that may be ran by people who don't look like them to tell those stories. Consider that Blavity, which is raised up to, I believe, $9 million and located in San Francisco, is black. And yet you have black Oakland City Council members who have never reached out to Morgan DeBaum or Blavity to have Blavity tell Oakland's story. And Blavity is a media company, okay? Are black Oakland council members afraid of African Americans who are successful in their own backyard? Oakland has to stop throwing out this idea that it's a shame to be black, and it has done that for decades. It's time to stop. And when I say ashamed to be black, I mean even those who are African American who should be supporting anybody who's black, who is a pioneer in tech or any level of industry in Oakland, not just people they like, even people they don't like. Because in my case, I've interviewed a number of people, a number of politicians, a number of elected officials on my channel who also then happen to fit into the area of description that I'm talking about. And yet I've interviewed them anyway, and I've always given them a space to present their ideas. Think about that. But back to the main point. The only reason this passed so quickly and was given so much attention so fast is because it fits a pattern of a group that is new to Oakland, primarily responsible for a lot of the gentrification we see, either directly or indirectly, and wants to make sure that its traditions and pastimes are protected. And they're not black.